Oh,
Hey,
look,
how's it?
we're even early. We're 1 minute early, so we'll let people tune in and shoot the breeze for a bit. Oh,
Yeah,
look, we just clicked over. We just clicked over on the hour.
there
Hey,
you go.
Christo's here already. G'day,
Good
Christo.
job. Christo's
Nice
on the
one, mate.
job.
Finger on the button. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, that's good. No, I forgot, Jono. I was supposed to send out a notice and say, hey, Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central Time, we're going to be live. And then about 7:58, I said, wait a minute. I didn't even send out a note. That's
There it is.
okay. Hey, Christo's here. We're ready to start then.
Hey, speaking of that, by the way, just for people watching this back later, we didn't even talk about this beforehand, but we're probably going to have to go, for reasons we don't have to discuss, but we might move this forward by an hour next week, maybe
Okay.
7.
Yep, that's right.
Anyway, we can announce that later. Missing the both of you, so great to hear from you two again. Thanks, Christo. Miss you too, man. We had a good
Yep.
time in Israel. Actually, that's a good excuse to talk about the tour. Let's do that. Of course, this year, dear viewers, we are going, well, it's not even this year yet. In 2023, November 2023, we will be doing Egypt and Jordan as one leg of the tour, first up in the first half of November. And then from the 12th of November, we will be entering through into Israel and continuing the Tanakh tour. You can do Egypt, Jordan, you can do Israel, you can do them both together, and you will incur a $100 combination discount if you
That's
do
right.
both legs of the tour. Or you can do one or the other. You could do Egypt, Jordan, you can do Israel by themselves, and that's absolutely fine. The details are at tanakhtours.com, and heaps of people have already signed up. It's incredible, actually, how popular, in particular, the Egypt Jordan tour is. It's really filling up quickly. So if you are intending to go, and we know that a lot of people are telling us that they are, and they want to get their deposits down, probably get them down sooner rather than later because it is filling pretty quickly. And the rooms that we've reserved, they are limited. So we want you to join us. Christo said, I'll be in Shul when you're live, so I'll catch up on the recording after Shabbos. Okay, cool.
Oh,
No
that's
worries.
fine. That's fine. Yeah, we had to get priorities straight. But look, I'm telling you, usually on these tours, you want to motivate people to jump in early. And one of the reasons we tell them to jump in early is because there's also an early bird discount. We're going to talk about this until the tour is filled, or at least until December 31st. Maybe we'll tell them that this is it.
I'm going to stop telling them. I'm going to stop telling them that because too many people are taking advantage of the early bird discount, and everyone's saving so much money.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah,
but
no, it's really. Go ahead.
no, both tours. Now that you've said it, both tours, both legs of the Tanakh tour in November. If you put your deposit down prior to 2023, then again another $100 off early bird discount. So that is the incentive to do that, and a lot of people are taking advantage of that saving.
That's right. Look, I was going to say, we're going to tell people that for some reason, and we're still working out this technical thing, but I can stream this to Facebook and YouTube, but it seems like our comments on the Facebook side aren't coming through. We've noticed that we always get the YouTube comments, it seems. I'm not sure. Maybe it's something I need to figure out. I'm not
Yeah.
sure exactly
Yeah,
what that is.
no, but the YouTube comments are certainly dominating. If you want to interact with us in real time, as Christo is right now, he just said deposit for the other tour is almost ready. Have it before December 20. That's great.
Yes.
Then you will get the saving, even though you said, Christo, that you didn't want it. I'm still going to give it to you, even
I'm
though I
going to
said I
put the
wouldn't.
link. I'm putting the link up for the YouTube channel.
There
That
we go.
way, if they they
If
want to
they're on
ask a
Facebook,
question, because one of the things we want to do, and we've told them this week after week, we really do want to interact. This is an opportunity where we can tackle different questions. We can field questions. We can put comments up. And so, for instance, I can put Christo's comment up here. Look at that.
there
So
you go.
what we
Clever.
really want to do is to be able to put that kind of thing up, and
And then
for
discuss
some
it.
reason, yeah, and that
Yeah.
way,
Now that,
while we're addressing it, the question's up.
yeah. Yeah, that's right. Uh, Tell us what you really think is the
Yeah,
underlying theme, is the subtitle of this program. Tell us what you really think. So if you have questions in regards to what we've been discussing, in regards to the Moses scroll, in regards to just the Tanakh in general, even about the tour. If you haven't got this already, you need to go to Amazon and get it. Moses Scroll by Ross K. Nichols. He's a good bloke. I know him.
Wait a minute. Look,
What?
Jono,
Yeah.
let's do this. Look at that. See, do
There it
you
is. Oh,
see
that's
it?
even nicer.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
So that way, when we want to show something, we're getting the hang of this. This is also practice for us. We
You are
can bring
quite
up.
the techie guy.
Mhm.
The MosesScroll.com. Christo said, the only thing I don't like having to wait almost a whole year before having to meet up with you again. I know it.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I tell you
that's
what,
the
it
thing
goes
about these
fast when you're
tours.
organizing the tour.
That's the thing about these tours. You meet people you become very close with. You build lifelong friendships, and we still keep up with people who haven't been with us in quite a few years. We've become very close friends with them. So
Speaking of which, let me. I don't know if she's listening, but good day to Leah, because she became, and it's not that we've had over 100 people on Tanakh tours. We've had way more than 100 people. But as far as our secret Tanakh tour community is concerned, on Facebook, we have a group, and when you put your deposit down, we add you to that community, and you can interact with
yeah,
others that have been or are going onto the Tanakh tour. She became number 100. So of all the people that are on Facebook that use that group, Leah became number 100. So thank you for that. And that's great. So boy, we've really taken a lot of people to Israel, Ross.
yeah,
Uh,
and I think for a while, I've always looked at that. One of the things that I often say is that, of course, I love to travel to Israel and now Jordan, and look forward to traveling to Egypt. But one of my favorite parts of these tours is to see these sites through someone else's eyes, like their first time over there.
yeah.
It always brings me a lot of joy to take people to these places. We see them every year. A lot of the places we change it up, obviously,
Mm.
but that's one of the highlights.
It is, isn't it? So every year we do have a number of people who have come to Israel for the first time. Every year we do have a number of people who have been on Tanakh tours before.
Yeah,
So it's great to catch up with people, and as you mentioned, it's great to see them experience something in Israel for the very first time. It's always good. Christo, by the way, just said great cover design in regards to the Moses Scroll cover, and of course that's Daniel Wright
that's
who
right.
designed that. Who
That's correct. I should say it's correct. It is right. That's correct. Daniel Wright
Daniel Wright,
is the only person I'll ever use on my covers. He also designed the
exceptionally
map. The guy's
talented.
really talented. Yeah.
Oh, now just quickly tell us about the map, because the map is now available for purchase for people who. This is a map that Ross handed out whilst we were on tour, and it was
Yep.
really handy. There it
Yep.
is. Okay, good one. So it really is exceptionally good. But you've just made it available for purchase. Tell everyone about that.
Yeah, on my website, rossknichols.com, I'll pull that link up because I'm so excited. First of all, talking about talented people, Anna just revamped my website, and
Hey Anna.
so
Hey Derek.
yeah, so she made this nice page. If people want the map, this is how they can get it. Let me post that link here.
Hmm.
And no, it's really, I think, again, Daniel Wright has come through again, and we especially designed this. We designed it with sites not only that we use on the tour, but also key significant sites for the study of the Hebrew Bible.
Hmm.
Also for the work that we're doing in Jordan, particularly around the Moses scroll. So
Mm.
yeah, so that's how they can get the map. And but Jono, I have something I want to share,
Go on.
and I think this is going to be pretty cool. If everything works the way I think it is, I built a video, a promo video for the tour, and I'm going to show that. Watch that. You ready?
Show it
You
to me.
ready? All
Go.
right, get ready. Here we go.
Oh
Jono,
yeah. No,
man,
I'm
look,
excited.
hey, I'm pumped up. I want to go get a ticket for the tour. I'm already on it, but I want to go get a ticket just because I saw that video.
I
How
know
about
it. I
that?
know that you did a really good job, and yeah, look, I'm really looking forward to it. Couple of comments here, Ross.
Okay, all right.
Let's see. Now, Oregon Freeburn. Is this Karen? Okay,
That's
I
Karen.
own
That's
three
Karen.
copies.
She's going on both of these, by
She's
the
going
way.
on both
She's
tours,
signed up. Yeah.
and yeah, and she said I own three copies of that book. That's funny, isn't it? Because Peggy just said to you recently that she read the book for the third time the other day.
Yeah.
You could have done that, Karen. You could have just read it three times, but buy three copies. That's
That's
absolutely
okay.
fine.
That's all right. Don't discourage Jono. Be an encourager.
No, she's buying some for her
No,
friends, no doubt.
thank you very much, Karen.
There you go. No, she
And
said
I
I'm going
hope
to go
that
and order
people get that.
the Hebrew learning book tonight if I remember. Well, let me remind you. Here it is. These are the words, and that's available on Amazon as well. Um,
Hey, guess who did that cover design? That's Daniel
oh,
Wright.
and you're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
There you go. Orson said, "Okay, so you've got me to start believing that there was a Moses that wrote part of Deuteronomy. Grand,
Okay.
yeah. All
All
right,
right.
we're with you. We're with you." Um, What's this? Maybe I should get an Indiana Jones hat after that commercial. It certainly
Yeah,
makes
you
you feel like that.
definitely need one. You can get it before you go, or you can get it. I see them all over the place while we're there.
Tell
So
you what, when we were in Jordan down in the Wadi Rum, it sort of got me feeling like I wanted to get a Lawrence of Arabia outfit.
yeah.
Didn't do it, but the
Well,
temptation was there.
my son Toby did. You remember he had the whole
Oh
head
yeah,
wrap,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I thought about getting that as well, but I didn't. I regretted it because there were a couple of times when we did the camel ride, and then when we did the Jeep. What do you call it? A Jeep jamboree, or we loaded up in Jeeps and we took off across the desert at Wadi Rum, and that was pretty cool. So
Let me just
I
show you
don't know.
this. See that?
Yeah,
Oh, it's
what is
upside
that?
down. It's upside down. That was a little gift to me from DJ who's watching.
Hey DJ, how's it
Hey
going?
DJ, I keep that on my desk. G'day, mate. Nice of
Yeah,
you to tune in.
well, Orson says leather in the desert. No thanks. Let me tell you, the hat that I have is part leather, but along the sides, it's breathable. So it's kind of a
That's what you want.
faux. I mean, from a distance, you'd say that's a cool hat. That looks like an Indiana Jones hat, but it's breathable. So
What's the
yeah, it
Jeep
was.
Jam, Christo? What's the Jeep Jam?
No, I said like a Jeep jamboree. We took off in Jeeps across the
Oh,
trucks and, on the desert jamboree. Heard me say that.
yeah.
So, the thing about it is we really do hope people join us, and it is unique for a lot of reasons. But this year, I know that some are signing up. The majority of people so far, I guess I can say without giving a number, the majority of people have elected to do the Egypt Jordan leg, almost 2 to 1 over the Israel. But we do have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, so far most of those who've signed up for Israel are taking advantage of both the
Hmm.
Egypt Jordan and the Israel. I
There's a
think
lot of
there
people who
might
are
be
doing both.
one,
Hmm.
maybe one that's signed up for the Israel, but if I'm not mistaken, that's Christo, and he said that as soon as he can get the funds together, he's going to get the Egypt Jordan
He's
leg
doing
as
that as
well.
well. So yeah, so they're definitely feeling fast. It's a great start to the season, and it's so good, isn't it? Because after all of the uncertainty of COVID, the last couple of years just been a real pain. It was great to be able to get back into the land to do a comprehensive tour of Jordan. We had an absolutely brilliant time, and it was really good. And to do Israel and to document it all every step of the way on Facebook. Hashtag Tanakh Tours.
Yep.
Hashtag Tanakh Tours. So if you put that into your search engine on Facebook, it'll bring up all the photos and videos, all the footage that we took all the way along every day, every destination that we went to, just to give you an idea of the kind of stuff that we do and the things that we see, um, and and to dispel, all of that uncertainty of the last couple of years, which was just an enormous pain.
Yeah.
There are now people are still asking me, even in the reminiscent of that uncertainty. People are saying, "Look, are there any restrictions? Are there any requirements? In regards to COVID and all this sort of stuff?" There isn't for Jordan. There is not for Israel anymore. You can go in and out, and you're not going to have any sort of
Nor
problem with them.
Egypt. Nor
And I'm
Egypt.
pretty sure that's the case with
Yeah.
Egypt as well. So as far as those countries are concerned, that's done. If you have been vaccinated, if you haven't been vaccinated, if you want to wear a mask, if you don't want to wear a mask, if you want to, all of this sort of stuff,
Yep.
it's entirely up to you, and it's easy. So
Yep.
it's for everybody.
Yep. No, and so anyway, we didn't log on just to talk about the tour, but just about
Let's
every
move
time
on.
you see us until the tour is filled, we will be talking about the tour
I'm
because we
Yep.
want people to join us. Go ahead, Jono.
The last time that we spoke, and I don't mean last week, like last week we really did do a program centering on the tour and talking about all the things. Let's move off that now and jump back into October when we spoke last concerning the Moses Scroll.
Okay.
That particular conversation, and I'll just do this very briefly by way of summary. We were talking about the first commandment as it appears in our canonical text in the Pentateuch, and the seventh commandment as it appears in the Moses Scroll. And what we were very interested in is the differences between the two, and as far as the caveat attached is concerned, that caveat saying, and I'm paraphrasing, don't commit idolatry, because if you do, I'm going to take it out on your sons, your grandsons, and your
Right.
great grandsons. Right?
That was the most,
What
I think you called it the most controversial that we've done.
Yeah, the most controversial program that we've done, and the reason why it was controversial is because this concept, which is referred to by some scholars as vicarious punishment or transgenerational curses,
Yep.
has always been a point of contention when trying to, because there are other verses that say, no, God does not do that. For example, Ezekiel chapter 18, Jeremiah chapter 31.
Deuteronomy 24:16,
There it is.
Yep.
Absolutely. So, and in no uncertain terms does it say that. Well, in the Moses Scroll, it attaches that caveat to a different commandment, and that commandment says, "Do not lift the name of Elohim to deceive." Don't
Right.
attach the name, my name. This is in the first person. Don't attach my name to a deception and tell everyone that I said so, because that's an infringement that I myself will avenge, is what it
Mhm.
says in the Moses Scroll. And then it gives an example: fathers unto sons, unto grandsons, unto great grandsons. In other words, fathers deceiving impressionable youth. And so, what it is in the Moses Scroll, it is an example of the infringement. It's descriptive of the infringement rather than the target of punishment, as you see in the canonical text in the Pentateuch. Now, we talked about that, and then we said, in light of the fact that the Moses Scroll does not necessitate a monarchy, it doesn't necessitate a temple, it doesn't necessitate a priesthood, it certainly does not necessitate animal sacrifices.
Mhm.
Therefore, with this seventh commandment in the Moses Scroll and those facts, are we looking at a greater text that may have an enormous amount of deception with God's name attached to it, giving it a kosher stamp, so to speak? Is this what we're dealing with? That's why in that discussion, and you can go back on truth2you.org, you'll see a couple of
Yep.
programs back, we talked about that, and we said this may be the most deceptive, the most controversial program that we've ever done in relation to the deceit that may exist within the canonical text. With that said, and is that a fair summary, Ross?
Yeah, I think so. As I recall, that's pretty much what we talked about. That was right before our trip, so it
Hmm.
goes back several weeks. And like you said, people can go listen to that.
People go listen to that. Now, Charles, who we love, g'day, Charles, who often comments with brilliant comments on that program. Charles commented saying, and by the way, boys and girls, you can please, by all means, leave comments on our programs. We will address them if we would like to do so, and just sort of unpack some stuff. By all
Yep.
means, leave comments, and we'll get to it. Charles said, "Thank you both for having the courage to wrestle with these highly charged subjects," and it is a highly charged subject. Absolutely. I know that you both rub elbows with very strident, pious, and respectable people who will probably reject the question outright without grappling with the evidence, perhaps even cast conspiratorial glances in your direction. I, for one, however, believe that God is tough enough to handle sincere and rational criticisms from good men who are trying to make sense of serious contradictions regarding the most pondered subjects under the sun. For example, he has some questions here. What does our Creator really want from us? Has his sacred message been added to, subtracted from, twisted out of context by ordinary men, exploited? Are these not questions worth asking? Charles says. Brilliant comment. Thank you very much, Charles. Maybe we can springboard off that into a discussion, Ross.
Yeah, no, I think that's inquiring minds want to know. I mean,
Yeah,
one of the things that Charles said, it just reminded me, one of my favorite passages is Micah chapter 6, verse 6 through 8. Can I jump in with that
go
before
ahead.
we,
Yeah.
because look, a lot of people, a lot of different religious traditions have a lot of different ideas about what does God want? What does God want from me? Judaism has answers, Christianity has answers, Islam has answers. Well, the Bible also has an answer. And one of my favorite passages is Micah 6, verse 6 through 8.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the JPS, so bear with me. It's not so literal, but it's okay for what our purposes are here. With what shall I approach the Lord? Do homage to God on high. Shall I approach him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Would the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with myriads of streams of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for my sins? He's told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? Only to do justice, to love goodness, and to walk modestly with your God. I mean, that is, as it's been called, people have often said it's the Bible in the little. In other
Mm-hmm.
words, with that verse right there, just it encapsulates so much, and it stands in some ways in opposition to volumes of theological books. Now I'm pointing behind me at books. These are mostly Bibles here, but
Sure.
the idea is that a lot of people have a lot of ideas, but at times those ideas seem to run counter to the biblical message.
Speaking of which, can I throw one in? Because
Yeah,
as you were
sure.
reading that, I thought of another one which I absolutely like, and I know you do too. Jeremiah. Oh, speaking of Jeremiah, before I read it,
Yeah,
well, let me read it first because we're in the context. But I want you to tell everyone about the latest series that you're doing. Okay, but
yeah,
this is Jeremiah chapter 7, verse. I'm going to read from verse 21 on. Why not? But it's really 23 that I want to focus on. Thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, add your burnt offerings to your other sacrifices and eat meat. For when I freed your fathers from the land of Egypt, I did not speak with them or command them concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices.
yeah,
But this is what I commanded them: do my bidding, that I may be your God, and that you may be my people. Walk only in the way that I enjoin upon you, that it may go well with you.
right.
That's
Yep,
all. That's
yep.
it. I like it.
People think that's too simple. Look, Jeremiah has something in mind. How is it that Jeremiah challenges the religious status quo? What is it about Jeremiah? Now, look, some of these things that Jeremiah says are difficult to understand to a lot of people. And why is that? Because they seem to contradict a lot of other things in the biblical text. Jeremiah, think about this. He challenges the priesthood of his day. See, we get this image in our minds, if you will, that the priesthood was totally righteous and holy, and the people might have misbehaved and wandered off the path, but certainly not the priest. And so there's this naivety that goes on in people's minds, I think. But when you read the text, you see people like Jeremiah. He's challenging the religious people of his day. He's challenging the external elements of religion that make up so much of biblical faith.
Mm.
Jeremiah, to me, I told people at the outset of this teaching series that I'm presently, I've done 2 classes. This coming Saturday would be number 3. that, in my opinion, Jeremiah is the singular most important book in the Hebrew Bible, for a lot of reasons, which we'll get into. I'm going to post the link.
Do post the
Yep.
link, because I just want to tell everybody that I've watched the first and the second that you've done on Jeremiah, and quite honestly, and I'm not just saying this, they're exceptional. I mean, they're really exceptional. If people have not watched those yet, there's only two. Watch them before this Shabbat, and catch up, because you're going to want to keep up to date on this particular series that Ross is doing on Jeremiah. It really is very, very good, and
Yeah.
the last one was just excellent, Ross. I have to say, it was just some of the best work you've done, I think.
Well, I appreciate that, and the reason that the material is so good, it's not even necessarily a hat tip to me. It's the material is so powerful when you look at Jeremiah. Again, the passage that you just read, um, it sounds a lot like Jeremiah is challenging the sacrificial cult. Now, a lot of people do their best to explain that away, and they say, no, as someone recently put it on Facebook, um, God only spoke audibly the 10 words, and beyond that, he didn't say anything. So technically, it's sort of tongue in cheek when Jeremiah says, God didn't tell you about sacrifices and offering in other words, people are trying to find a way to suggest that God did want sacrifice and offering, and to suggest that Jeremiah is not saying that. The typical view, we won't go into everything about sacrifices tonight, but the typical view, as you know, is if you had your heart right, if the people were pure of heart and offered the sacrifices, then God would want the sacrifices. But there seems to be this running commentary, particularly from the prophets, where that's not what he desired. It's not what he didn't need it.
Mm.
Hosea says it very plainly. For I desire, God speaking, for Hosea 6:6, for I desire chesed, loving kindness, velozevak, and not sacrifice. Well, you can't say I don't desire sacrifice and then qualify it by saying, I mean, unless your heart's right, and then I do
Yeah.
desire.
And
Yeah,
an additional difficulty, of course, Ross, we find in various places, but Hosea chapter 14, for example, is one of those where it talks of a future time when Israel is returning, and they say, "We'll return and render for bulls the words of our lips."
right.
And
Yeah,
what that screams is that, well, then the sacrificial system is not needed at all, if because God says, "And I will accept them freely. I'll
yeah,
accept them back, and I'll accept them free,"
yeah,
and goes on in that regard. Well, if that's the case, and that's a possibility, then we don't need the sacrificial system at all. And if you
yeah,
take that up with a fundamentalist in Judaism, they'll say, well, you see, um, quite right. God does not require animals. He doesn't require animal sacrifice. It's not
yeah,
as if he eats them or really actually smells them or anything like that. And we all love the smell of a good barbecue, but you see, it was for Israel, because Israel needed it, because they were
yeah,
coming out of Egypt, and it was an idolatrous sacrificial context from culture in which they were escaping from, and they still had to. This is the kind of
yeah,
argument that we get, and some of us aren't satisfied with that. So as you point out, the prophets have something to say about that.
yeah.
And certainly the Moses scroll seems to be in favor of those comments by the prophets.
And let me add one other detail. I think it's pretty obvious that it's been 2,000 years with no sacrifice,
Hmm.
without a monarchy, and without a temple. And
For a priesthood,
so
for a
it
functioning
begs
priesthood.
it begs the question, if this is something that God needs or desires. Like, see, there's a prevalent thought that if what we need to be working on is getting back to that system, the
Hmm.
sacrificial cult, the priesthood, and so
That's the
forth, there
general
is this
idea, yeah.
idea. But it just, if you read like Isaiah 66, Isaiah 66 is really a condemnation of these external trappings. The
Mm.
one who sacrifices a lamb. is like one who slays a man. The one who, I mean, it's just, it's
Like one who breaks
really,
a dog's
and it
neck. And,
ultimately says that these who desire these things have gone after their own desires and not what God desires. So, what does God really desire? You know, there is this idea that has become prevalent. A lot of people get to this because they study other ancient cultures and they say, you know, all ancient cultures felt like if you, Jono, commit a crime, something has to die. Now,
mm,
it can be you or you can bring your lamb, but something has to die. As if God needs to have this blood to kind of take care of the infringement, and that is in fact prevalent in a lot of ancient cultures. But what I think is so amazing, particularly in light of the Moses scroll, is and also in light of what the prophets seem to be suggesting, is that what is revolutionary about God's way is that it is a matter of obedience. Here are some tenets of the faith. Here are some principles, some 10 words, you might say, that you follow these, it'll go well with you. You don't follow these, it will not go well with you.
that's it.
And how hard is that? What if God's message is so simple and yet so profound and so powerful? I mean, but people act like that's not a big deal. What if the world, let me say one other thing. What if the world just one day said, we're not going to do any stealing? There's going to be no larceny, no
Mm,
theft.
mm.
Wow. One day, just one
What an
day.
enormous difference it would make.
What an
Yeah.
enormous difference. Yeah.
Just on that, Orson said, ever wonder why people started on 10 commandments instead of a nice even 12? That's a good question. The reason why 12 is a handy number, of course, and we use it in timekeeping is because it's so divisible. We can
Yeah.
divide it by 4, we can divide it by 3, you can divide it by 2. It's just divided by 6. And you can have increments of time that are even, in a sense, and, uh, and it's really handy. Um, we have 10 words because in the particularly in the Moses scroll, this is what was given to the people and spoken audibly, as you just mentioned, Ross, from Horeb. 10 words. The interesting thing about that, Orson, of course, is that in the canonical text, and this is something that we've mentioned a number of times here on the show, is that in the Pentateuch, both in Deuteronomy and in Exodus, there's actually only 9 commandments. The reason why there's a reference to 10 is because in 3 places in the
Yep.
Tanakh it makes reference to 10 commandments. But when you count them, there's actually only 9. And depending on your denomination or your religious expression, it'll be divided in different ways. So some split the first commandment into 2, some split the last commandment into 2, but you must have 10, and that's the way that they do it. In the Moses scroll, you actually have 10, and they're
Yep.
clearly delineated. We've done various programs on that.
Yep.
But that's why 10, not 9, or 10, not 12. Awesome. What's
Yep.
Christo said, there are numerous places in the Tanakh, Jonah chapter 3, for example, that proves that we can atone for sins without blood sacrifices. Yeah, that's right. And hey, g'day, Peggy.
Hey, Peggy.
Mentioned you a little bit earlier.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's right, Christo. I mean, also within the sacrificial system, there's an example where it says, you know, if Jimmy's too poor and he can't afford a bull or a pigeon, then he can atone with flour, right? So
Hmm.
there need not be a shedding of blood. Or there's another example where Aaron atones for the people with incense. I think, is that right, Ross? If I remember correctly, and all of this sort of stuff. But all of that, I would be questioning entirely
Yep.
because I don't believe that the sacrificial system is something that is God ordained.
Yep.
I know that the Tanakh, the Pentateuch claims as much, but in light of the Moses scroll, there's no place for it because everything is accounted for.
Yeah.
But it's a good point. It's a good point that Christo brings up. Absolutely.
And I
Uh,
should add to that point, it is obvious. It clearly is obvious that at a certain stage in the development of what we would call the biblical period, that that system does become an active part of the religion of ancient Israel. There's no
mm,
doubt that it certainly does. And we also know that other ancient peoples had this sacrificial cult system. There are plenty of studies out
Mm,
there on that.
mm,
But what we find is that there is a continual opposition to that system that is expressed. I mean, when you read Amos chapter 5, verse 25 in particular, where Amos questions the legitimacy of this, and he asks a question: did you offer sacrifices to me in the 40 years in the wilderness? It's like the
mm.
obvious answer to that question is no. But I understand that a lot of people look. We grew up. I think I can speak at least for you and I, because we've had this conversation. I grew up very fundamentalist. I began with 66 books in a King James Bible,
Hmm.
and that was the inspired, inerrant Word of God, and everything in there had to make sense. And what people would do if you ran into difficulties making sense, the problem wasn't with the book; it's with you,
Mm.
Ross. You just simply don't know enough. You don't have the Holy Spirit. You don't. God's ways are higher than your ways. Just nod and agree. This is what we believe here. And I did for years. I did that. And
Mm.
then,
So did I.
from a traditional fundamentalist Christian standpoint, I began to find difficulties, particularly and initially, with Christianity, with the New Testament. And look, people can say all they want, well, you weren't committed enough. Maybe that was not the problem. I assure you, I was in 110%. But you find these difficulties, and slowly but surely you begin to have the prayerful. I mean, I put a lot of prayer on,
Mm.
God, I'm struggling with this, help me, don't let me make a mistake.
Don't let me make a mistake, because particularly from the perspective of a fundamentalist, if you're starting to question things and weigh things up and entertain ideas outside of the traditional norms, then the consequences, as you understand them at the time, could be dire. So
Yeah,
yeah, very carefully, very cautiously, very prayerfully do you approach these topics. And by the way, this is the reason why I love Truth to You listeners, because they they come and allow themselves to be pushed outside of their comfort zone and entertain within their own private space, maybe by themselves, thoughts and ideas and possibilities and difficult questions that they would in no way be able to entertain at church or in synagogue or whatever it might be.
right.
And but this is the difference between people who are sincere in their faith expression and people who are sincere truth seekers.
Yeah,
Um, People who are sincere truth seekers want to get to the origins of things and strip away things that turn out to be not true. People who are sincere in their tradition want to conform, and they want to tell others and show others how they can conform. Before we continue with that, everyone's commenting here. I want to see this.
yep,
Um, Christo said numerous offerings were not just for sins, but for thanking the Eternal One. Yeah, that's correct. In the sacrificial system, that's true. How odd is that, though? Have you ever really thought about that? Like, thank you, God, and then like, really, that's
yeah.
what He wants. I mean, it's very very odd to think
He
about.
says he doesn't desire it, but people did
Yeah, but
think him that way.
go and
There's
grab
no
that
doubt.
lamb and slit
Yeah,
its throat,
yeah,
because that's an acceptable way to show your thanks to me. I mean, but you're right. I mean, that's a thing. Orson said, "Is the same?" I love this comment. It's a good comment, Orson. The same sacrificial system as in the. Now I have to forgive me. I'm going to pronounce this here.
Upnot Fishtim. Utnat Fishtim.
Good.
It's
No,
the
oh,
the
well
Epic
done.
of Gilgamesh. Yeah,
Thank you for saving me.
yeah.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know. Ross, do you know? Is it
I
similar?
have read the Epic of Gilgamesh, and not only that document, but other things that people have often looked at as they try to work out the details of the ancient stories in the biblical text. You do have these other ancient systems with similar narratives of the flood, for instance, and
Mm-hmm.
other creation narratives. In comparative religious studies, you might say.
Mm,
You have Babylonian, you have other epics as well. But I think that a lot of these ancient people had very similar beliefs on cosmology and on how do we connect with God. I mean, that's clear. So I would
Mm.
say, yeah, to some degree, we do see signs in the biblical text of connections with these other ancient cultures. You can look up Hammurabi's code. You know, people will often
Oh yeah.
compare those kind of things with some of the biblical text as well.
And
So,
yeah, that's right. That's very, and I have done that, and you're quite right. Peggy said I had a pastor who told me not to be concerned about study books, but leave the researching to them. I've experienced that as well, Peggy.
yeah,
They don't like it too much when because what and to be fair, a church, a synagogue, whatever the expression may be, they want people who are sincere in that faith expression. It is a faith expression. It is an institution, and they're happy to have people who will conform to that. If you're going to think outside that box, that's no fun for them.
yeah.
And and of course, Christo said, "Glad you ignored him, Peggy." But like for example, when you listened last week, you may have heard me say that I had the Jovies come and knock on the door, and I love the Jovies, like because I
Now,
respect
people
their
might not call them Jovies. Well, who are you talking about? Tell them who you're talking.
Jehovah's Witnesses,
Okay, all right, all right,
JWs, Jovies.
all right.
And so they come and knock on the door. I have respect for their courage,
Yep,
and so I don't turn them away because I don't want to. I don't want them to feel bad. I want to feel like they're
yeah,
doing well. Bring them on in, and they're always happy to tell me the things. But it was really interesting to me when I was asking them about Charles Taze Russell, for whom I also have a great deal of respect, as a sort of a precursor to Zionism a decade before Herzl. Um, some of the things that Charles Taze Russell, saw in the prophets
yep,
about the return of Israel to the land. Um, and he would go and hold rallies and speak to Jewish people and say, these prophecies will come about, and it will come about because you return to the land. Have you thought about returning to the land? Maybe you should return to the land. Let me encourage you about returning to the land.
yeah,
And obviously within his own Christian theology, there's a whole lot of other stuff going on there.
sure.
But this is something that he did. Now, when I put it to them, they had this almost this look of disdain and like, what do we care about Israel? We're the new Israel now. There's clearly
Yeah,
a replacement
replacement.
theology.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it was to their detriment. I thought it's such a shame because there's a lot about Charles Taze Russell to be admired and upheld, particularly in as far as the well, anyway, I could go into the theologies and all that sort of stuff, but
yeah. It's a
but
very
they
he was very strict in let the Bible interpret the Bible. If the
yeah
Bible talks about the people of Israel, it means the people of Israel, not some spiritual Israel. If it's
yeah
talking about the land of Israel, Beulah land does not mean going to heaven and walk streets of gold and singing in the great by and by. It means God's people, the same physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are going to return to the land, the same land, terra firma,
hmm
that they were on before. And that was the beauty of what he did. He allowed the biblical text to speak for themselves without interruption. And I think that's what so many groups miss. And I'm talking fundamentalist in every branch of every faith that claims the
hmm
Bible. There is a tendency to look at certain texts out of context, to reinterpret those texts, to
hmm
translate them poorly, interpolate them heavily, and present them in a whole new suit. And
yeah.
you miss the beauty of what it actually says.
That's exactly right. And in this case, I think the Jovies were of the mindset that they are the new spiritual Israel, whatever that means, and all this sort of stuff, the replacement theology. But the interesting thing was that even though I was quoting to them their founder, with whom they kind of distance themselves from now, they were like, no, 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 no. That that's not our that's not our box. Like you
Yeah,
need to agree with what's in our box. Even when I was reading to them, some of the prophecies that you were just alluding to, they listened to them and they were like, that's not
yeah,
it's not a thing. It's just and so as nice as they were, and then they went on their way to do more of what they do, and but it was fascinating to me because yeah, that's right. Charles Taze Russell was a man who stepped out of the ordinary um, uh, teachings of the day and said, but this is what it says in the text. The difference
yeah,
between a truth seeker and a conformist, if you like, someone sincere in their particular expression. Got a whole bunch of comments. Did you want to comment on that while I read these?
Yeah, go ahead and you can catch up on the comments. That's fine.
Mm.
We don't want to leave them out. We said comment, and then they comment, and then we keep
Hey,
rolling.
commenting. Christo said, can't recall exactly where it was. Midrash Vaikra Rabbah says that all the sacrifices will be abolished except the sacrifice of thanksgiving. Love the Bible verses it cites to support this. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know of that particular. That is interesting though. So there's a teaching that says all of it will be abolished.
Well, let
Um,
me jump in.
Go ahead.
One thing that's important about what Christo brings out is we're not, when we challenge some of these things, this isn't our idea. Like, the biblical text demand that these things be challenged. And why is
Mm,
that? Because it offers two different views. One view is the view that the sacrificial system is ordained, it's required. We have texts that say this will be done continually every day. So you're left with the opinion that you go, well, it's not. I mean, it's
mm,
not. So if
mm,
it's not being done every day, well, with the destruction, particularly in 70, when the temple was destroyed, it sent people who love the book and want to live according to the book back to the book to say, what do we do now?
mm,
And to Christo's point, there are conversations in Jewish literature where these discussions take place. What do we do in the post sacrificial cult world? What do we do in the post temple world? What do we do now? How is it that we approach God? If everything that we have lived and practiced for the past however long is no longer available as an option. Well, it's
mm,
interesting. The same book from which they derived the sacrificial cult and the requirements thereto gave them options. Now, these options are what we're looking at here, particularly as I brought up before. If it says that God never desired, velozevak, God desired chesed velozevak and not sacrifice, then it makes you think, well, if he doesn't desire it, and the fact that we haven't had it in 2,000 years, well, what people often do is they go, well, Ross, obviously you haven't read Ezekiel 40 through 48, as if I don't have that in my Bible and I've never read it. You're right. Okay. Well, that's not true. I have read it. But you get these different, you get different options almost.
mm,
And clearly, the people who want the sacrificial system will only look at those verses, but they'll demand that you look at those too. But when you say, but what about this where it says that God doesn't desire it? Well, that's just because their heart wasn't right. Well, you know what I'm saying? It's
yeah.
very one-sided in the approach. Um, but to Christo's point, they had to go back to the drawing board. There are tensions in the text. Does God want a king? God seems to say, God doesn't seem to. He says, I never asked for this, and so forth and so on. But yet you have other texts which talk about a coming king. So what do? Well, you have to look at both.
Mm. So let me digress for a second. You and I were both in our own personal journey Christian fundamentalists. We were
Yep.
brought up in the church, and when you were brought up in a particular institution or a religious expression, you're born into what I like to refer to as an agreed assumption. That is the point at which you stop asking why. Everyone agrees. Um, that this is where we're going to stop asking why, because to every statement you can ask a question and it just keeps going back and back and back. But eventually it gets a bit silly and everyone just kind of agrees this is what we believe. So
Yep.
you're born into an institution and it comes with a whole set of preconceived teachings and you move on from there. And it's not until you kind of mature or you run into a contradictory verse or something that doesn't quite gel that you start to become a little bit you start to become a little critical of the text, not to criticize the text but to
Analytical.
evaluate,
Yeah.
analytical,
Yep.
and trying to see why this is the case. When you arrive there and you might find a hole in the text, say when we were in particularly when you're weighing up the Greek New Testament with the Hebrew,
Yeah.
the scriptures, Greek scriptures, Hebrew scriptures, and you're trying to see the claims between the two are clashing with each other, then it emboldens you to go, what else? What else am I missing here? And
Yeah.
obviously, you and I went on a journey separately, but studied our way from the Greek scriptures into the Hebrew scriptures.
Yeah.
Once you have that mindset of being able to think critically and to analyze and to evaluate, it doesn't stop. You may pull up tent pegs and go and set up your tent somewhere else, but it's not going to be
Yeah.
long before you start going, so, all right, now let's take a look around and let's evaluate and employ the same tools that enabled me to move from there to here. Let's employ those tools and see where we are now.
Well,
It's
let's
be-
stay
Go ahead.
stay there for a minute. I'm sorry, but stay there for just a minute, because I can so relate to that. I remember, and it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not been that long. It's been decades for me, but nonetheless, I still remember it well. And one of the things that caused me to challenge the agreed assumptions, it wasn't so much that somebody challenged them. It was the text themselves.
Mm,
And I
gave you
remember
permission to.
when I
Mm,
first studied a harmony of the Gospels, where you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John side by side, or
hmm
I have various ones. One was just the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, Luke. And you begin to look at, well, Matthew says this, Mark says this, Luke says this. I remember when I would read discrepancies or differences between the narrators, the first answer from the fundamentalist apologetic standpoint is this, and I know you know this, it's like, well, it's like a car wreck. You have different people view this car wreck, and they have
right.
different, they give you different details. You're like, yeah, but these are big, different details. One says it's a motorcycle, one says it's an 18-wheeler. They're different. Well, those kind of differences, and some weren't major, they were minor, but it put a chink in that armor that said, no, it's without error. It's inerrant. It is absolutely fundamental, and now I didn't get angry, but I did begin to reach a place where I said, well, this isn't what I thought it was. Now that's no fault, and I'm going to go to the Hebrew Bible in a minute, but that was no fault in my mind to the writers of those Greek documents. It was just,
Mm,
I even thought, well, this is, the ancient storytelling mode or method or whatever. But I just kind of put it aside and I said, you know what? At least I know that the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, doesn't have that.
mm,
And I remember moving and basically putting on the shelf, here's my Christian writings,
yep.
I'm out,
Yep.
because it no longer fit the mold that I had been told that it should fit into. It was no longer the authoritative, inerrant, absolute, this is the gospel, as we
Mm,
say.
mm.
So I was able to put that up. Well, when I went to the Hebrew Bible, I carried that same fundamentalism that I had with the 66 books of my older Bible. I
Sure.
took that with me and I said, well, okay, now I have 24 books. And
So
these are the inspired.
you refined your fundamentalism to those to the Hebrew scriptures.
Yep,
That's fair.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mm,
And let me tell you, it felt good for me, Jono, to drive those stakes in the ground.
hmm
And I said, maybe I think I said it audibly. I'm sure I did at some point or another. Now this is a Tanakh. It only has the Hebrew scripture. And I remember saying, this is the authoritative, inerrant, it's everything that the other was, minus the stuff that I found difficulties with. And
mm,
so I brought the same words, the same concepts, and I found a new group of people that would sing that hymnal with me.
hmm
And they were of various different groups, but there were people like Orthodox Jews, they were, traditional Jewish people, they were B'nai Noah types, and
mm,
and they often, this new group of friends that I became associated with, looked with me at the other documents that I had dismissed and found fault with, and they said that they have problems, but not me.
Yeah.
You
No,
see?
I did that. I absolutely did that, and people will know, following through, my journey on Truth to You, that I invested a lot of time in counter missionary activity, which is absolutely fine. One of the reasons why I did that, Ross, is because number one, no one likes to be deceived, and when you find out that it's highly questionable, well, really, when you find out that it just doesn't gel, and then you shelve it, as you say, you want to expose it, you want to throw some light on it, and point your finger at it, and really, kind of have a go.
Yeah,
Um, the other reason is because I was kicking myself. My particular personality type is such that I will look back with disdain upon my former stupider self, and and I
yeah,
will look and I will look. Once I've come to a realization, and I'm moving forward, I look back and I think, my word, I was so stupid. But was I really? I mean, I was born into it. I was coaxed along by people who should have known better. And I look at those people and I think, you really should know better. And
yeah,
and maybe you actually do know better. I mean, you've met people like that. I've met people like that who actually do know better, and they don't tell the people. That's
yeah,
what really gets me. You
yeah. Like
won't get that.
like
You
Peggy
won't.
says, how did I fall for that? Right.
Yeah, yeah. That's it. Yeah, yeah. You feel like that, and not everyone, but eh, but what I like, I've even had, I won't mention names, but there have been people that have been on Truth to You who have said things like, "Oh, no, 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 don't tell them that. Don't tell the people that. We can't say that. No, we need to give them a window out."
Yeah,
And I'm thinking, really? Why? Why can't we
yeah,
just tell it like it is? See, the thing is that everybody has a confirmation bias.
yep,
That is to say that we like to hear things. Everybody does this. It's fine. It's just a part of the human condition. We like to hear information that already agrees with us.
sure.
We don't like to hear information that challenges what we really feel like is the sacred cow. Don't kick my sacred cow. Leave it
That's right.
alone. And and when we do hear something like that, it's discomforting, because it does take us outside of our comfort zone, and it forces us to think. And generally people don't like to think, particularly when it's may result in a conclusion other than what they already hold dear. G'day, Daniel. Daniel just tuned in. You're late again.
Hey,
I'm
Daniel,
doffing your
right?
pay.
That's okay. We love you anyway. We've already
Doffing your
bragged
pay.
about you, and
That's
it's
all I'm
better
saying.
that we do that when you're not here. So,
Yeah, that's right. No, we
but
were singing your praises earlier in regards to the map that is
yep,
now available for sale. And boys and girls, if you're just tuning in, you'll find that. Scroll back in the YouTube feed, and you'll see the link there. Um, there he is. So,
now
but this is my
let
point.
me,
So go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I forgot where I am because Daniel interrupted
Well,
me because he's late.
Daniel messed this up. Well, let me tell you. So for me, when I moved out of, and I was open about it. I told
Mm,
people, look, I don't call myself a Christian. I am now, and then I had to pause because I couldn't fill in the blank. What are you now, Ross? I didn't know. I looked at different options. I said maybe I should convert. Maybe I should just call myself a Noahide or a B'nai Noah. Maybe I'm just a Gentile God-fearer. Maybe I am a member of the lost tribes of Israel. Maybe I
maybe I'm a
am
Karaite. Maybe I'm a
Maybe I'm
religious
a
Zionist.
Karaite.
Maybe I'm
I looked at charism. I said, you
yeah.
know, this kind of fits me because I'm a biblicist. I am a
Mm.
text guy. I'm a
I have
scripture
a
guy.
I have a great
And
respect for the Karaites.
I
Got a
do
lot of
too.
Karaite
I do
buddies.
too.
Mm.
But I was looking and I couldn't find what I am. I mean, there was no way. So I ended up embracing that and saying it doesn't matter. I just love the Bible. I'm a Bible teacher. I'm not Jewish. I'm not Christian. And I found a niche that I could fit in. But it was a lonely place, a very lonely place. And let me tell you, Jono, for a long time, I dared not challenge any further. I'm telling you, I knew intuitively that I wasn't being fair. And let me tell you something. There's something about the biblical text, and now, not only, but the Moses scroll as well. There's an honesty. I kept thinking, in Christianity, people used to say, honest to Jesus. It's an
Mm.
expression. Uh, and I got to thinking, what if I'm not being honest to Moses, or God forbid, what if I'm not being honest to God? What if I am embracing something just like I was before? But it's the dare not bring it up. I've had people get very vocal and angry with me and say, Ross, if you say that, just like you said that people have told you, don't say that. Let's not go there. Let me
Mm.
tell you, I decided, and it was a very difficult decision, but I said, I'm going to go there. I'm
Mm.
going to look analytically at the text, and I thought this was my first thought. I'll take a break in a minute and let somebody else talk, Jono. But I remember looking at the Gospels side by side, and uh, harmonistically, or the lack thereof, as the case might be. And I said, I wonder if there's anything like this with the Torah, because I felt like I knew the Pentateuch very well. I mean, I taught from it year after year after year, going through the annual cycle of readings. We did the triennial cycle. We did
Mm.
all these things. But I noticed, if I were being honest, I noticed that there were different versions of the same story. And a couple of years ago, I began to think, when I look at Exodus, for instance, and I compare Exodus 18, for instance, with this particular, or a better case is compare Deuteronomy 5 and Exodus 20, the
I was
10
just about to
words,
say,
and you
yeah.
notice that they're not the same. Here's what
Mm.
most people do. They're close. They're close. This is supposed to be the
This
10
is
words.
the revelation narrative
This is
upon
it.
which the entire book is based. That's right.
Yeah.
Why are they not identical?
Yeah.
Absolutely, and this is really valid question. See, if I were to define us, if I could give us a defining title, I would say that we are now originalists.
I like that.
Orson just said, "Hey, man, I'm just an atheist. Just find this interesting," and absolutely, I mean, it really is interesting, Orson.
Yeah.
And I would say that we are originalists in the sense that we want to know what specifically did Moses originally write, as it says in Deuteronomy chapter 31, that he wrote a scroll. What was on that scroll? Because
Yeah.
we know for a fact that it wasn't, Genesis all the way through to the end of Deuteronomy.
Right.
That's a no-brainer. What exactly was on it? And we have most certainly come to the conclusion on multi-level um, evidence platform that it was the Moses scroll that was discovered in the Wadi Mujib. We're happy for that to be challenged, and we'd be happy for people uh, to question that and to bring those forward, and let's discuss it. But that's
Yeah.
absolutely where we are, and as a result, we find ourselves concurring with the prophets when it says uh, God never commanded sacrifices and so on and so forth, because the Moses scroll just does not necessitate any of that system. Peggy just said, "Why are those leather strips? Where?
Yeah.
Where are
She
those leather
corrected.
strips?
Where are those?
Where
Yeah.
are they? Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
boy.
No joke. Hey, but here's a thought. Um, you said it's a no-brainer, and it let's remember that not everyone's there. But I'll say this: if you look at the Hebrew Bible, for instance,
Mm,
I think that everyone would agree that, for instance, when you read the book of Job, when we approach the book of Job, for instance, there's some fantastic. I love the book of Job. In fact, when I came
it's a
back to
wild read.
God, huh?
Mm, it's a
Do what?
wild read, that's for
It
sure.
is a
Yeah.
wild read, but I
Mm,
remember when I first came back, rededicated my life for the umpteenth time as a young man in my 20s.
mm,
I remember, for some strange reason, that was the first book I read. I don't know why, but I
mm.
remember reading it. But if you are to read that book, you're going to get all sorts of ideas about God. Now, are those ideas about God the ones that we should hold? And I think most people would agree that sometimes Job and or his friends would have views of God that don't align with other texts in the Bible.
Oh, yeah, for
So,
sure.
so what we can't say is that, or look at the book of Ecclesiastes. The book of Ecclesiastes has some wonderful things in it. But should
Hmm.
we derive our whole theology from the book of Ecclesiastes? It's certainly a pessimistic book in many ways, but there are some beautiful things in there as well. So what I began to realize is that within the biblical text, in the Tanakh, we have various different types of material. We have poetry, we have prose, we have all of these. We have stories that are to be taken literally. We have some stories that are metaphorical. We have,
Hmm.
there are all these different literary genres within the book, and I began to give myself um, permission to rank them accordingly. And so I remember as I began to do that, I said, well, I can accept this as a literary style, for instance, it may be Job's friend's opinion about God, but how does that align with other texts in the Bible? I think the mistake is for any religious person who views the book as a divinely inspired document from which we should derive our faith and practice. I think for a person to consider it all on the same level
Mm.
is the mistake that we find ourselves in.
Mm.
And that was my first thing that I gave myself permission. The other thing was, it's not that I have this war against traditional views of the text. That didn't even
Yeah, no, not
figure
at
in,
all. Yeah, of
because I have good friends that are Orthodox, Chabad. I have people that are in different
course.
places
Yeah.
theologically, and I wish them all the happiness in the world. But I also recognize that some of the viewpoints and some of the traditional beliefs don't find support in the text.
Mm.
And that to me began to be the overriding everything that I wanted to look at. I wanted to look at it from the context of the text itself.
Mm.
Hey,
Absolutely.
Patty.
No, well said. Well said. And Patty and Dave just tuned in. G'day, Patty and Dave.
Hey, Dave. Hey, Patty.
Now, you just to tie those two together, we started the program with just recapping on the previous conversation that we had in October in regards to transgenerational curses or vicarious punishment, um, and in as far as it appears in the first commandment of the Pentateuch, both in Deuteronomy and Exodus, and Job. And it just reminded me, Job chapter 21, verse 19. Job says, God is reserving his punishment for his sons. Let him pay. Let it be paid back to him that he may feel it. In other words, the person
That did it.
who was sinned. Yeah, let
Yeah.
him pay, not his sons. Let him feel it. Let his eyes see his ruins, and let him drink the wrath of Shaddai.
Yeah.
For what does he care about the fate of his family when his number of months run out? So
Yeah.
even Job disagrees thoroughly
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the idea of that caveat in the first commandment as it appears in the Torah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that what happens, and I've been there. The reason I know this is because I have espoused this view. There is this idea we take from Isaiah: God's ways are higher than your ways, his thoughts your thoughts. So if we read something that we disagree with, any number of things I could list, but I won't.
Yeah,
We,
we
often
gravitate to
the
that verse. That's, you
the
know what that
answer,
is? That
what?
is the Obi-Wan Kenobi going, "These are not the droids you were looking for." Right?
That's right.
Is that we go to
Uh,
that verse and we go, "Oh, God's
yeah.
ways are not our ways. Don't think
Yeah,
about it. You don't
but
have to understand it. It's too
but
much."
in within the narrative, we also have challenges to that view. Remember, if you go back to Genesis, for instance, the writer of the story in Genesis, where Abraham says, "Shall not the judge of all the earth
All
do
the earth do right.
justice?"
Mm.
And I think that we ought to ask those questions. We ought
Mm.
to ask those questions, and we shouldn't be scared to ask those questions
Mm.
because we're doing it out of sincerity. Look, if I wouldn't have asked questions, I would still probably be happily a part of the place that I started. But
Mm.
I think that most of us
And
wouldn't.
ignorance is bliss, Ross. Ignorance is bliss.
It
It's
truly
absolutely
is.
true. It's the happiest place to be is to not know the things,
Yeah.
because within the church or within whatever system that you're in, when you comply and everyone's playing the game, you get
Yeah.
on fine, and there's certain social benefits to that. There absolutely
Yeah.
is. When you are brave enough to ask those pointed questions and to seek to find the original and the truths therein, it can be an isolating place, and
It's
that has to be
very
said.
lonely.
It
Yeah,
can be.
very lonely.
It absolutely can be. Hmm.
Now, let me say, I think most people know my story, so I won't. I'm not doing testimony hour here, but I think one of the most powerful moments, I was alone, and the traditional view that Moses wrote the entirety of the Pentateuch is what I was actually facing. You remember this because you and I had established a very close relationship by this point, and so you were my sounding board. And I remember I would call you and I would say, "Oh, I'm thinking about this," and we had some very good debate and discussion
Mm.
back at that time. But for me, I remember thinking, I know what I've been told. In fact, you can't open the Pentateuch in most English or Hebrew versions without it saying the five books of Moses. The first book of Moses, called Genesis, Bereshit, the second book of Moses, so forth and so on. But I remember I didn't read someone's view that that was challenged. I challenged it. As I read it, I thought, why does this not agree? This is supposedly written by Moses. This is supposedly, but they don't agree. And then I began to notice that there were things, it was written in the third person. I know people have heard this ad
Hmm.
nauseum from me, but I'm telling you, that alone, everything when I would read, yes, it says in Deuteronomy 31 that Moses wrote the Torah, but it's in the third person. Moses,
Mm.
and it says, this is what really hit me, Deuteronomy 31:24 through 26.
Hmm.
And when he finished writing the Torah, HaTorah Hazot, this Torah, unto the very end, says he rolled it up, or he doesn't say he rolled it up. He said he gave it to the Levites who were in charge of carrying the ark and said, keep it. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, Moses wrote it to the very end, but we're not to the very
We're
end
not
yet.
at the end. What was on that scroll?
That is
Absolutely.
what changed everything for me. And
Yeah,
it gave me permission to ask the
that's right.
question, what did Moses write? Now, it's not
That's
just
right.
Moses, I might add. The book of Daniel. The book of Daniel I love the book of Daniel. I love the
Hmm.
whole Tanakh, I'll go ahead and say. But I remember when I would read Daniel, and a lot of it's third person, and
Mm.
then you get to chapter 7 and it transitions into a first person document.
And I,
I,
Daniel.
Daniel, you
Mm.
know. Well, same thing happens in Jeremiah. My present study on Jeremiah, we're going to get into third person, first person. In other
Mm.
words, what I'm saying is, I'm not, like I tell people often that listen to my classes, I'm not the one taking liberty with the text. People might want to say, well, Ross is just liberal in his views of the text. No, I'm the one holding the text accountable.
Yeah.
I'm reading it at its value. I'm allowing it to tell me. I want the writers to speak to me as they intended it.
Mm.
Nowhere when Moses wrote the scroll did he say, this is my first scroll. I am Moses. And then this is my second scroll.
Mm.
So, what did Moses write? That was the first question. And I think allowing myself permission to ask that with trepidation, I might add,
Mm.
led to some remarkable discoveries.
Going to catch up with
Yep.
the comments here. Patty quite rightly said, "Would a child be afraid to ask his father a question?" That absolutely, and in the words of, I'm going to quote the Christian apologist Michael Brown. I think put it in one of his books that God is not threatened by our questions,
Yep.
and I agree with him. Absolutely, we should question everything. Ask yourself, why do I believe what I believe? Because if the conclusion to that question is, well, I guess I was just born into this belief, well, then you shouldn't be satisfied with that. You need to own it and go and find out where this particular belief originates. And if you're satisfied with that and you want to continue with that, by all means.
Yep.
Ricky, Ricky, you're all in capitals. It makes me feel like you're yelling at me. It says a parable cannot interpret itself. Only a human being with a clean spirit can. The sheep are the unseen words. The pasture is the heart. It's like Passover. I don't know what to make of that. Ross.
Uh, yeah, I'm not real sure what he's saying, but
All right.
let's see.
Thanks for weighing in, though,
Yep,
Ricky.
yep,
But Peggy, I'd much rather be seeking deeper things, never alone. There is Jehovah always draws us and points the way, but your social circles fade away. It's true. Yeah, that's
yep.
right. And because, if the social circles revolve around the institution, then inevitably that's what's going to happen. If the conclusions that you're coming to are contrary to that, to what they hold traditionally. Ricky's tried again. Okay, the word is created in the image of God. Who can read it, let alone who can see it? You like to be judged, but I'm not sure what's going on there.
Well, just as a point, and we've said this many times, and we should say it again. People are in different places, and they have different views, and that's certainly welcome. Everyone has to choose the way that they approach this. What we're doing is we are looking at the text. If God gave His word, and it is authoritative and inerrant, and it's not to be read or questioned or understood, then that makes things much more difficult. I think that it was delivered.
Mm,
And I think that, when you read, for instance, in Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 8, this is a fascinating text. People often ignore it, but I think it's very important. Jeremiah 8:8. Who are we to say that we are wise, and the Torah, the law of the Lord, is with us, when the lying pen of the scribes has made it a lie? Jeremiah
hmm
saw something which suggested that there had been
The
certain
corruption.
corruptions
Mm,
inserted into it. We do have a warning in Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 2, Jeremiah chapter 12, verse 13:1, or 12:32, depending on whether you're looking at an English or a Hebrew Bible,
mm,
where there's clearly a warning against adding to or taking away from. But we obviously have places where certain interpolations have taken place. Uh, but nonetheless, I think it is incumbent upon anyone who would seek to understand to not only read, study, and pray about, but I think that all of those things are necessary. Whereas the other view is just take whatever somebody tells you, and then that would make everyone right, because Pentecostals, Methodists, Orthodox, atheists, everybody has their own view. And if you say, well, I challenge your view, and they said, yeah, but who are you to challenge? Who are you to judge? So I think it's
mm,
important that we have to be able to read, and read it at face value. So if the
mm.
Bible tells me that Moses finished writing the scroll unto the very end, and it's not even done yet, I have to question, well, who wrote that? Or
Yep.
the other example I often give, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, died and was buried. Well, who
Mm,
wrote that? Well, people say, well, Joshua wrote it. Well, keep reading in Deuteronomy 34. Clearly, Joshua didn't write it either.
mm,
Uh, but all of these things come in. So a lot of it comes down to authorship. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really focused on right now is who wrote it, and what was the intention of the writer. Why do the accounts in Deuteronomy 5 and Exodus 20, both claiming to be the word that God spoke from Horeb on the day of assembly from the midst of the fire, why don't they agree?
mm.
That's a big one to me.
Yep.
Why is it that Exodus chapter 16 talks about the children of Israel eating manna for 40 years, and yet that's in the second year of the Exodus, and Moses didn't even go into the land, which Exodus 16 talks about. Clearly, Moses didn't write that because he wasn't alive when that was written.
Mm,
The list goes on and on. There are hundreds and hundreds of examples.
mm,
So our quest has to be just like Malachi ends. Remember the Torah of Moses that he commanded all Israel at Horeb. Remember it. Now, why would Malachi say that? It's almost a challenge to say, what is that Torah that
mm.
God commanded Moses at Horeb to
Quite
all
right.
Israel? I think it gives us license to look. It's
No,
my
absolutely. Dave just got on and said, "G'day, Ross and Jono. Totally, mate. I threw a question to Dave regarding the Moses Scroll earlier in the week, and he's very busy at the moment, no doubt. But it'll be a fascinating when we nut it out because it's a mathematical question, which is absolutely in Dave's field. So kicked it into his court, and when we come to a conclusion on that, it'll be an interesting discussion that we can have. Who is wise? This is Christo. Who is wise, but one who learns from everyone. A vote
Yep.
for one. It's nice that he never said you had to agree, but just to learn from who you can. That's true, and that reminds me of a quote from Maimonides that I often quote, Christo, and that is, accept truth from whatever source it comes. Of course, the assumption is that you already have have anchored yourself to truths by which you can evaluate. But yeah, I mean, that's a good quote. I like that.
Yeah, Pirkei Avot has quite a bit of good wisdom in there, and there's another quote, Christo. You probably know it better than I, but it's something to the effect that any disagreement for the sake of heaven is something worthy to engage in. In other words, we're not debating politics or something that people often debate nowadays. We're talking about the most important book ever written. And I don't want anyone to ever think that my opinion of the biblical text is not the highest as it can be. I assure you,
Mm,
this is what I've devoted my life to. And I think most of the people on this channel right now have done the same. So it really is that we are engaged in the pursuit of understanding the very thing that we're seeking, and that is, what is it that God communicated to humanity,
mm,
and what is it that we're searching for? I think the answers are different across the board. There's so many different answers out there, so you have to ask your question: well, who's right? All of these people that are on right now have different views about certain things. So,
Speaking of which, Stephen Simpson just commented and said, Proverbs 25:2, it is the glory of Elohim to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter.
yep,
It's a consistent message throughout the Tanakh, actually, is God saying that if you seek me, you will find me. So we're clearly not, and I love the verse in Isaiah where God says, "Come on, let us reason together," right?
yeah,
Which clearly shows us that we have a reasonable God, and He has given us the ability to reason. We should
mhm,
exercise those skills.
yeah.
Um, yeah, no, good one.
Yeah, we all have different views. A lot of these things are very challenging, and one of the reasons that we're talking about the things that we're talking about tonight goes back to the comment that Charles left, and we appreciate Charles' comment. And it was
Mm,
basically he was appreciative of the fact that we were willing to question things. We do so in a very respectful manner. Jono nor I have any desire to pick a fight or to ridicule or make fun of someone's firmly held beliefs. But we've come to the place where our desire for truth is above everything else. So I've been wrong so many times in my life,
yeah, me too.
theologically wrong, let's
Mm,
say in error theologically, that I grew tired of playing pretend.
mm,
In other words, I said, look, I'm not going to fake it for anyone. I've always had this view.
mm,
I'm not going to assume that a preacher or a rabbi or a philosopher
mm,
has figured this out. I told Jono earlier we were talking about a different subject,
mm,
and it's often put forward. Someone will say, well, who are you to challenge? We've been doing this for X number of thousands or hundreds of years. And my response to that is always the same, regardless of who says it. No, you haven't.
mm,
You haven't studied any longer than I have, and I haven't studied longer. We've all been seeking truth with fear and trepidation at points, but we're looking for answers. And I think that if the Bible represents within it God's message for humanity, then we ought to be looking within that document to find it. And we have different voices. We have different voices. We have different hands. I go back to Job's friends. They were very opinionated as to the nature of God and the reason that Job was suffering, for instance. Some of that was quite frankly wrong, and God says that toward the end of the book.
Mm.
But so we can't derive our theology from that. Within the Pentateuch, even we have different voices, different hands telling us different things about God.
Mm.
And as we look at that and we bring in the voice of the prophets and the hands of the prophets, we begin to see differences there as well. So it becomes it's incumbent on us who claim to be people of the book to actually look at the book. And I
Mm.
think that's what's so important.
Quite right. Karen just said, my personal motto is I reserve the right to be wrong. I use that a lot too,
That's right.
Karen.
That's right.
And I will often attach that because I uh, someone once said recently, and I'm paraphrasing, if you believe something strongly, if you believe to be in possession of a truth and you withhold it, then is that
Yeah,
not a form of a lie?
that's right.
And particularly if someone has come to you and asked your opinion on a particular, and and it may well be a learned opinion, then to withhold it because you think that it might hurt their ears, is that not a form of a lie? So I much prefer to, and this has always been the case in truth to you, to serve it to you straight. And but yeah, I do reserve my right to be wrong because as I mentioned earlier on, you pull up your stakes, your tent pegs somewhere. You go as you refine your faith, and you hammer them down again. And you think I've arrived, and then
Yeah.
it's not long before you learn something else, or you come into new information, and you find yourself pulling up your tent pegs again. Um, so that is really very much our journey out of fundamentalism, and into what I would say is a desire for the original, a desire for the truth, and I would say that we are originalists, and we certainly find ourselves in thoroughly enjoying the Moses Scroll, and we're going to get further into the text. We'll return to the text and get into some of those points again in further later discussions on this program. I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, we wanted to address Charles' comment there and talk a little bit by that. Lying by omission. Absolutely right, Dave. Lying by omission. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I
And Karen said,
think
I can relate, Jono. Yeah, I've arrived many times, she said. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. I mean, look, it's a quest, it's a journey, it is a walk, as the rabbis often call it. The term halakha.
Mm,
It's a walk, it's a journey. Here's something that I always like to go back to, regardless of what you think about the narratives of the patriarchs. Abram is called to leave everything with which he is familiar. Leave your home, leave your father's house, leave the place of your birth, and go to a place that I will show you. And I think a lot of people miss this. He
mm,
tells Abram, Lech Lecha, walk for yourself.
mhm,
And I think that's the hardest thing for anyone to do. Walk for yourself is probably should be the driving force to everyone's spiritual journey. If you leave everything you're familiar with, and get this, like most of us would have a question. I don't know. Before I can sit under your teaching, Jono, I'm going to need to know that you agree with me on these
that's
things.
right.
Let me see
Confirmation
your
bias. Yeah.
doctrine. Let me see your articles of faith. Because if your articles of faith don't come, imagine if Abram had told God, you know what, God, I've kind of got it made here in Ur of the Chaldees, and it's kind of nice, and I don't really want to leave everything. Maybe I'll just stay here unless you could show it to me. I need
Mm,
to kind of see where I'm going. No, he gets up and he
mm,
goes. And I think that in many ways, my journey has been stop and go. I was reluctant to leave. I did ultimately take a hard look at what I'd been told, but it was very difficult to leave everything that I was familiar with. But
mm,
once I did, there was a liberation.
yeah.
And then I settled in again, and I put my tent pegs down, and I said, okay, I've arrived. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty. Like Karen said, I've arrived this time,
Yep.
and there's no going back. That's for sure. And there's no need to go further because I now have the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help me God. And a lot of people think that it's uncomfortable the place I'm at, but I have never felt more close to God than I am at this point, where I'm actually seeking without handcuffs
Mm.
the answers that everything within me searched for all these years, and I've not arrived, and I now realize that it's a constant walk. It's a walk of faith. I think that's what
Mm.
we're on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we could define faith. Then we'd have to have that conversation. But maybe we can start on that
Right.
next week, because we've done an hour and a half, and I think that is, yeah. Dave said one must keep one's mind open. In other words, be willing to receive a valid argument and evaluate it, even if it is contrary to that which you hold dear. Patty just said, if two people have the same opinion, one is unnecessary. I want to communicate with you because you see it differently. I value that difference. That's a quote from Stephen
Stephen Covey.
Covey.
Yep.
Covey. Okay.
One thing I want to tell people as we prepare to sign off is I really hope that people will take a look at. I just posted the link, um, and it I don't know if it's clickable, but if it is clickable in the comments on my
Seems to be.
YouTube channel, I have a playlist that's called "The World and Words of the Prophet Jeremiah." And in that, you'll get the two previous classes that I did. And if you can get caught up, I know people can do this. They binge Netflix, so
And
they can
I'm
totally
telling you
do.
now, I was absolutely glued to it. Both of these episodes, Ross, I really was. So I'm just telling the viewers, if you haven't seen these already, you're going to love them. They really are very, very good. Get up to date, because there'll be another episode this Shabbat on Jeremiah. It's really most worth your while to do so. Chris, I said, appreciate your time as always. We'll listen to tomorrow's broadcast. Good one. And also, probably next week, we may do this an hour earlier. We'll let you know on the social
Yeah,
medias.
we'll do a better job of advertising, but we have received feedback that 7 p.m., maybe even 6:30 would work better for people. Because if you're on the East Coast in the U.S., we start at 9. That's a little late for some people. But anyway, we'll pick a
We'll
good
make it
time
work.
that works for everyone, and I'll let you know when that is, and we'll advertise it.
There. Now, last word, Tanakh Tours. You've got it on the screen there. TanakhTours.com. Filling fast, Egypt, Jordan, and then Israel. This coming November. Don't leave it too late, because if you put your deposit down before 2023, you will save the early bird discount.
That's right.
If you go on both legs of the tour, you'll save with a combination, $100 combination discount as well. All right.
Very
I don't
good.
want to talk about the discounts too much, because everyone's taking advantage of
That's
them.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, leave all
We're
that.
going.
That's secret.
We'll be back
Just
next
go
week.
to TanakhTours.com, and if you're careful and you read all the fine print, you can see all the discounts in there. By the way, you'll be sending out invoices to those who've signed up, I'm sure.
That's done.
And so people will know kind of where they're at. But look, we
And
really
detailed
want you to
information
join
follow.
us.
Yep.
Jono and I are constantly working to tweak this tour, and we've got some fantastic things. Again, let me let them watch, because some of these people just logged in. I just want to show this video one more time, Jono, as we get
Let's
ready
go
to
out on the
sign off.
video.
Let's do it one more time. All right,
There
the
we go.
address is on the screen. Everybody, get on there. Get your
I'm excited.
get your deposit paid, and we look forward to seeing you next week. We'll post an announcement, and until then, have a beautiful week. Join
Have a
me
great
this
week.
coming Saturday morning, 10:30 a.m. Central Time, and
For episode
follow me
3
on
on Jeremiah.
Facebook or on the Jeremiah, on the prophet Jeremiah. Have a
All
great
right.
week.